Masamune Makabe is a handsome young middle schooler with six-pack abs and an awesome personality. He's the total package. However, he wasn't always this way. Once, Masamune used to be a chubby kid whom everybody took for granted and bullied around. He even had a love interest once, but she cruelly rejected him, shaming his very personality, which left a deep scar on his mind. Ever since then, Masamune has worked hard on himself, and now he's a gym nut and overly conscious about the stuff that he eats. The guy comes from a fairly wealthy family and lives with his mother, who looks like his younger sister, and his sister, who looks like his mother. There was seriously something wrong with either the animators or a literal 12-year-old actually adopted Masamune. Masamune has recently transferred to a school in his locality and is looking forward to having a great time there. On his first day of school, as Masamune walks around staring at girls in their overly high skirts playing tennis, he realizes the perks of being hot. Once, Masamune was also a bad-looking chubby kid, but now that he was hot, everything changed. Everyone's demeanor around him changed, and everyone around him acted nicely, even if he made mistakes. Mistakes such as drooling over teenage girls in short skirts. Just as he enters the school premises, he witnesses the most popular kid in school, Shigeo Yamada, get public humiliation. The cocky senior publicly confesses to the hottest girl in school, Aki Adagaki, but is rejected in front of the whole school. Apparently, getting rejected by Aki immediately makes a popular guy basic. Masamune ignores this clear red flag about the school and heads to his class, quickly befriending the class representative Tei Futaba and yet another peculiar character, Kojuro Shuri, who is a boy but doesn't look or act like it. The girl from earlier, Aki, arrives in the room just as Masamune acquaints himself with his new friends, demanding who gave her the love letter. It was actually given by another one of their classmate, Akio Tanabe, a chubby kid just like Masamune's former self. Aki reads the letter aloud, berates the kid in front of everyone, and tears it up. Aki's hate towards boys and regular rejection of even the best ones have earned her the name Cruel Princess all around her school. She is a topic of interest for Masamune, who takes great attention and collects information about Aki from his newly made friends. She appears to be an icon around girls while being a devil around boys, but that's not the only thing that's strange about her. Despite being surrounded by her female lackeys at all times, Aki is rumored to eat all alone somewhere no one knows. Masamune decides to follow his maid Yoshino, also a student at the school, to find out where exactly Aki disappears during the lunch break. Perhaps, maybe he could find a secret about her. Like a second-grade private detective, Masamune follows Yoshino into the school's dormitory where he eavesdrops on their conversation. As expected, Aki is rude to her maid and scolds her for being late with her food. Masamune notices her with a large lunchbox and giggles, but just then a spider scares him and he is discovered by the two ladies. Masamune notices that there was more than one lunchbox that Aki had devoured. She was a demon when it came to eating. Aki gets flustered and discloses that she has a medical condition called hypoglycemia and needs to eat in large quantities in order to satisfy her appetite. Aki promises that Masamune will regret it if he ever exposes her secret, but Masamune is certain that this information is going to come in handy sooner or later. However, it doesn't even take him a minute to realize how wrong it was. Considering Aki's figure, no one would believe his story that she devoured tons of food every day. Masamune decides to keep the whole thing quiet. After a few days, during volleyball practice, Kojuro says that there are rumors about Masamune and Aki being friends. Masamune is amused as, even though he has only had a few encounters with Aki to date, she has always been rude to him. For people to consider him her friend, she must really treat people like crap. Later after school, when Yoshino is alone waiting for her maid to get her some bread, she is confronted once again by Akio, the same guy she had rejected earlier. He has heard the rumors of her getting close to Masamune and is envious of their growing closeness, which in reality doesn't exist. The love-crazy kid brings out a pair of scissors and tries to cut Aki's hair, but Masamune arrives just in time to intercept and saves Aki. Akio runs away scared at what he had done, and despite the pain being beyond anything, Masamune doesn't scream. This was all part of his plan. You see, back when Masamune was a chubby boy just like Akio, he visited Aki at her mansion to profess his love for her. But she did what she was famous for, berated him and broke his heart, even giving him the nickname Pig's Foot, a name that had stuck up to a few years ago. Ever since then, Masamune has been planning for the day that he can make her fall in love with him and shatter her heart, just like she shattered his. This was his plan, and it had now officially begun. He had fired his first shot. The next day, however, as Masamune reaches his school, he finds in his locker a letter. Kojuro thinks it's a love letter, but Masamune is skeptical, and rightly so. The letter has but 2 words: Pig's Foot. Masamune starts getting very cautious around his classmates. There was someone amongst them who knew of his past, and that was an issue he needed to deal with quickly. If everyone knew about his fat, ugly past, he would no longer be the hot, popular guy in school. And more importantly, his revenge would all go to waste. He needed to find out who the person was and why they were threatening him. Later that day, Masamune helps Yoshino with buying some food items from the school canteen. He takes this opportunity to accompany her to the dormitory to check if Aki was the one who sent the letter and was playing with him all along. As he follows the poor maid serving the ungrateful Aki, he can't help but feel sorry for her. Upon reaching the dormitory, he quickly realizes Aki would never do a thing as lowly as blackmail. She would have probably used the detail and planned an extravagant event to shame him in front of the entire school. After concluding that Aki was unknown to any links to his past, he delivers a classic line from one of the romance comic books and leaves her flustered. As he returns back to class, Masamune is caught in a snare trap surprisingly set up by none other than Yoshino. The girl wasn't a poor damsel in distress, she was the villain. She calls him Pigfoot and was the one who had planted the letter in Masamune's locker. Yoshino releases him and explains that her family had been attendants to the Adagaki family for centuries. Masamune also realizes that she was in the picture that he has with Aki from when they were small. He gets frustrated that his plans came to naught so quickly, but, surprisingly, Yoshino offers to help Masamune execute his revenge plan. Despite the generous offer, Masamune rejects it. It was his revenge plan, and he is determined to execute it on his own. Later after school, Masamune volunteers in the school's beautification club and is asked to clean the school's windows. During his work, Tei approaches him for a while and asks him out on a movie date. For a moment, Masamune is happy. He thanks his lucky stars he worked out for 8 years to become as hot as he was, but then he rejects her. Masamune only came to the school to exact revenge, and that's what he would do. Tei is not distraught. She understands that a hot guy like Masamune has other priorities and agrees to stay friends with him. When Tei leaves, Aki suddenly appears before Masamune. She had heard everything, and Masamune tells her that even though he rejected Tei, he wouldn't mind dating her. He accepts to exchange email addresses with Aki, but she claims that her cell phone is being broken. The two decide to meet up next week at the same place to exchange emails, but when the day arrives, Masamune finds himself on a wild goose chase all around the school for the email just to get rejected by Aki at the final moments. A frustrated Masamune looks on with anger when Yoshino arrives behind him and once again offers her help. This time, albeit regretfully, Masamune agrees. The next week arrives with some more school business as the class representative Tei announces that all her classmates will have to attend the supplementary classes for a month if any one of them fails the proficiency test. Everyone is pretty confident that they will pass, but Kojuro has other plans. He had scored single digits in all of his last tests and plans to at least beat that score this time around. Realizing the poor condition of his friend, Masamune decides to tutor Kojuro, and they both visit the library to study. There, Masamune notices Aki tutoring Yoshino nearby, who makes a sharp comment berating his intelligence, as Masamune did get caught up in that goose chase she had created earlier. Masamune wants to reply back, but he notices Yoshino and remembers that she would help him no matter what. He challenges Aki to make a wager between who will score higher, him and Kojuro, or her and Yoshino. If Masamune's team scores higher, Aki must go on a date with Masamune. And if Aki's team scores higher, he will feed her for an entire month, as well as wear a poster around his neck with any name that Aki gives him. The wager is on, and both teams begin their preparations for the exam. The first few days, Masamune takes it chill, as he knows that Yoshino would surely help him win, but he soon receives a phone call from Yoshino, who tells him that she won't be able to help him with the wager. The day of the proficiency test arrives, and Masamune's chibi mother prepares him lunch from home. In school, he also comes across Yoshino, who gives Masamune a black iced coffee from the vending machine. It's almost as if she has already decided that they would win, and tells him that all his studying does not matter. Masamune is pretty confident in himself, however, and ignores her and heads to the class. However, just as he grabs his pen to start the exam, his stomach starts acting up. He remembers the words that Yoshino had told him, that nothing he did mattered. Masamune believes that she had drugged him, and as soon as he finishes the test, he confronts her, but realizes that Aki was absent from a fever. He had already won, which is what Yoshino had meant in the first place. The boxed lunch he had brought from home had caused the stomachache. As promised in the wager, Masamune later meets Aki at the train station for a date. She, however, believes in some weird first date dress codes and appears in a cosplay costume making a fool out of herself. The two then head to a movie theater and watch a movie that perhaps only Morbius can beat in ratings. I mean, zombies that fall in passionate love? Come on! Later, when they eat at a restaurant, a young girl finally comes to Aki and tells her about her weird costume. Embarrassed, Aki goes to get some new clothes in a store nearby and lets out a yelp in anger at herself. Masamune rushes to check on her, but accidentally sees Aki in her undergarments, and she knocks him unconscious. When Masamune wakes up, he finds himself on Aki's lap and, just for a moment, starts falling in love with her again. However, he steadies himself and reminds himself that this was probably all Yoshino's doing, as she wanted to help him with his plan. After Aki leaves, Yoshino gives Masamune a call and finally reveals why she wanted to help him. She hopes that if she falls in love and he rejects her, she might get a bit humbler and ultimately much happier. With Yoshino on his side, Masamune is much more confident in his actions and decides to pace the plan a bit more. He uses the tactics from the same romance manga called Rose-Eyed Steroid in order to gather ideas to execute his revenge plan. The next day, he begins implementing the dialogues and mannerisms from the manga and even offers his umbrella in a heroic way to Aki in order to impress her and lure her into his trap. Masamune had hoped that this would please Yoshino, but she tells him that he was being creepy and getting more distant with Aki because of this. Instead of doing this random stupid thing, she suggests that the next time he meets Aki, he behaves a bit calmer and colder towards her. Masamune takes the advice a bit too seriously and straight up ignores Aki the whole day in school, even when she tries to return his umbrella. Aki soon stops Masamune in the hallway, consequently being flustered when trying to confront him as to why she is being ignored. He admits that he ignored her on purpose because he likes her. When she asks him what he likes about her, he yells everything and runs away to get some more advice from Yoshino. In the schoolyard, Yoshino refuses to give Masamune advice as he would just mess it up anyway. Masamune decides that he doesn't need Yoshino's help and writes a love letter and hands it to Aki. However, the cruel princess tears the letter before him and throws it away, telling him that he is acting like a selfish jerk. In reality, she had seen Masamune talk to Yoshino earlier about some plan and figured that perhaps he was a playboy trying to juggle two girls at once. Yoshino finds Aki at the playground and clears up the misunderstanding. Masamune just needed some advice about what to do to impress her. She notices that her mistress was troubled and puts two and two together. Aki liked Masamune as well. Later, when Aki walks back home, thinking and rethinking her emotions, she crosses an intersection and is almost hit by an approaching car. Masamune saves her from the danger just in time. As Aki looks in his eyes with a smile and finally is about to confess her feelings, a girl wearing a rosary comes out of the car and hugs Masamune. Now, this was no ordinary celebrity hug. This was the "we are long-lost lovers" hug. There was another twist in the revenge story of Masamune. For a pretty straightforward girl, she turns out to be quite the religious one, as she instantly starts praying to God, thanking that her prayers were answered, and she had a chance to meet with Masamune. Masamune, on the other hand, has no idea who this random chick is, and fails to say a word. Soon, the girl goes away after her bodyguard tells her that she's running late, but the whole thing has pushed back Masamune's plan. Once they depart, Aki walks down the same road she almost crashed in, completely disregarding every other vehicle around her. It's almost as if Masamune saved her from nothing. The next day, Masamune tries to talk to Aki, but he is not allowed to go to meet her by Yoshino, and so he leaves. In class, however, he is shocked to see the same girl from yesterday has transferred to their school. Her name is Neko Fujinomiya. As pretty as she is, she quickly becomes a class hottie. Everyone flocks to her side, and when Masamune confronts her, she tells everyone that Neko transferred into the school just because of him. Neko reveals that 3 years ago, Masamune offered his coat to her during Christmas, and she was so thankful that she fell in love with him. Masamune smiles, but he knows that the person Neko is describing is not him. 3 years ago, he was still a heavily bullied fatso. There's no way he would be that chivalrous. He takes her hand and drags her outside and asks her why she lied to everyone. She doesn't tell him why, nor does she tell him the truth. She simply tells him that she loves him, and that should be enough. Once again, for a moment, Masamune starts living a dream. When he was a fatty, there was no one for him, and now he was getting proposals left and right. He studies himself and then admits having an unrequited love for someone else. He takes Neko to see Aki in her class and points her out as his one-sided love. Thanks for watching part 1. If this video gets 1,000 likes, I will continue to part 2. Have a great day!